Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about building automated tests for any web application. We are Webflow developers, so I'm going to focus a bit the topic on building web automated tests for web apps in Webflow, but this actually works for everyone. Okay, so if you're building any other web application that it's not directly built in Webflow, you can still use this in your day-to-day workflows. Let's talk about automated tests. The first thing that maybe we want to define is what the hell is an automated test, right? I'm going to put you an example that if you've been coding a bit, you probably can relate a bit. And it's you're developing something, right? You simply are writing code, you're building functionalities, etc. But maybe at some point you decide to change some bits of your code, right? Or maybe you update some functions, maybe you update the UI, maybe you just make some refactors, maybe you add new features, maybe you remove some features, you do something in your project, and suddenly, not only the things that you wanted to update change, but also some things that you didn't think would be affected also change. Maybe you were trying to fix a bug, but maybe while fixing that bug, you don't realize that you actually created another bug, right? Or maybe when adding a new functionality, you don't realize that you broke a different functionality. Or maybe when, just updating something, you realize that you completely destroyed another functionality, right? So this is something that can happen a lot, especially the bigger your project is. The more moving parts you have in a project, the easier it is to just change something that can bring down the house, so just destroy many parts of your application. It's our goal, it's our task as developers to ensure that this does not happen. We have a few ways of doing it. We have, for example, linting when you're writing code, so you can make sure that you're not writing bad code. We also use TypeScript, and we can define types, so we are sure that all the code that we're writing, it's using the correct typings. But that's happening when you're developing. But the moment that you ship your app to production, the moment that you publish a Webflow site, the moment that you publish a Whisk application, or the moment that you send some code into production, that is going to be run by your users, right? And some things could go wrong. Some things could break. Some things could stop working as they expected. Maybe some things would still work, but the output, it's not the one that you would imagine it would be, etc. With automated tests, we can catch all these things because we can essentially do what the word says, create automated tests that test things for you. When you're building a web application, maybe every time that you make some changes, you want to go over your app and make sure that things are working right. Maybe you want to go and see, okay, if I go to this page, is it loading the data right? Yes. Okay. If I go to these, if I click on this element, is it showing the pop-up correctly? Yes. If I submit this form, is it creating a job application correctly? Yes. So you want to make sure that everything from your application is working correctly. And that's when you know that no functionalities are broken, no bugs were introduced, or no things are working differently than expected. Okay. I want to talk about 3 different ways that we can test things. Okay, we can test things doing unit tests, and we can test things doing integration tests, and we can test things doing end-to-end tests, like this. Okay, so unit tests, integration tests, and end-to-end tests. Each one of these goes from more simple to more complex, and not complex in a sense of that it is complex to write the test. It's just that it involves more steps. It involves more moving parts. Okay, unit test essentially would be as just testing a single function. So imagine that, for example, we have a function. Everything that I'm telling you right now, I'm gonna do it later by coding. You will see it. You will see the results. But unit test, essentially, you can think of it as just evaluating a single function. For example, we could have a function that just adds 2 numbers. Maybe the function is sum or whatever. We evaluate that, okay, if I take this function and I give it a number 2 and I give it a number 3, is the output 5? If it means that the function it's functioning correctly, right? It's running correctly. The moment that we jump into integration tests, we are essentially testing multiple functions running together. You can think of it, for example, as running a complex calculation. Maybe in that complex calculation, you need to run a few different functions. Maybe there's a function for gathering the inputs. Maybe there's another function for filtering the data. Maybe there's another function for sorting the data. Maybe there's another function for adding the data, and then it spits the result. So basically, you have a few functions working together, and you want to know what happens when you chain all that if the output is the expected one. Okay, so that would be an integration test. It's essentially testing how multiple functions interact together. Okay, and the last one, end-to-end test, it would be essentially as just testing your app live. So the same that I could do of just loading the app, going and click around stuff and making sure that when I click on this, that happens. When I load this page, this happens. When I delete this item, that happens, etc. The same that you would do it manually, we can create a bot that does it for us. And that bot will essentially just load a browser, and same as the bots do, it's going to start clicking around. It's going to start writing things around. It's going to start dragging things around. Whatever actions, whatever commands we give to that bot will execute those commands, and then it will scan the entire site, scan the page to make sure that what we have told the bot, it's the expected output. Okay, so this would be essentially how your live app behaves. That would be end-to-end tests. Okay, so I'm going to try to do all of these today, and then in the next stream, what we're going to do is go a bit further and talk about more advanced things like, okay, how we can move the testing step into our CI pipeline, which means that every time that, for example, we publish the Webflow site, we run the tests in the cloud. Or, anytime that we deploy some changes in the code base, before letting that code going into production, we run the tests to make sure that things are working fine, which means that we can safely ship that into production. Okay, so before doing all of that, we need to install a test runner. There are many different test runners that you can use. I'm going to give you a few examples. You can use, for example, Jest. You can use VTest, which I recommend it over Jest, because it's kind of like a newer and more modern version of Jest. There are other things like Cypress, etc. The main difference between all of these test runners is essentially their capabilities. For example, with Jest and with VTest, these two test runners are mainly focused on unit tests and integration tests. So these two testers, they don't have a built-in browser environment to do end-to-end testing. They are more specifically made for running small tests for small pieces of unit pieces. Okay. Then when you jump into Cypress or Playwright, these are more fully fledged test runners where you not only can do unit tests, but because you can still do unit tests, but also all of these test runners, they include browsers inside their machine, so they can spin up a browser. I can test things for you. Okay. In my case, today I am going to cover Playwright because it's a test runner that I personally, I think to me, it's one of the best of all the ones that I showed you and other ones that you can find, but it's really up to taste. So you can totally test any other test runner. One of the good things of all the test runners is that they pretty much share the same APIs. So when you when you define a test for one test runner, usually that same test would work in different test runners because they use a very similar API. They're mostly just copying each other. So that's good. Okay? Cool. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is just install this. I'm going to do everything from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to install this in a newly fresh project, and then we'll keep building things. Okay, great. So let's start coding. I have a fresh VS Code here. I just have a few notes for the stream, but that's it. And in this fresh VS Code, I am going to just follow the get started guide in here. So I'm going to install. In my case, I use PNPM. You can totally use NPM or Yarn if you want to, but I'm going to use PNPM. And I just need to type PNPM create playwright. Okay, so let's do it. PNPM create playwright, like that. And this is going to ask me if I want to use TypeScript or JavaScript. You know that I'm a fan of TypeScript, so I'm going to go with it. But if you want to use JavaScript, it's completely up to you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Okay, where to put the end-to-end tests? I'm going to put here. GitHub Actions Workflow. I am going to say yes, but I'm not going to cover it today. I'm going to cover it in the next stream, okay? And now it's asking me, do I want to install a Playwright browsers? I do want, because if we're going to do end-to-end testing, we're going to need the browsers installed. Okay, this will essentially install Firefox, Safari, Chrome. It's going to install all the different browsers, because when it runs the tests, it not only runs a test in one single browser, it runs a test in all of the browsers. So you know for sure that things are working across all the major browsers. So I'm going to say yes, but you could always install them manually if you wanted to. But I'm going to say yes. Okay, cool. And it's probably going to take a while, so I'm going to continue reading here. It's telling me what's installed, good. And then here it's giving me a first example of how to run the example tests. Because when I'm installing this, it's essentially going to install a template, something with a demo that we can see right in here. Cool. Okay, before doing that, let's just inspect what we have. Essentially, we have this. We have just a package because we're working with a package, a JavaScript package. But this could be any project that you have. It could be a Svelte application. It could be a raw JavaScript application. It could be the developer starter template from Finsweet. It could be anything. As long as you have a package JSON where you can install npm packages, that's good. And it has a config. And in this config, we can tweak stuff. But I'm going to talk about this config in the next stream probably. But you can see how the default config already includes Chrome, it includes Firefox, and it includes Safari. That's nice. Cool. Okay, I'm going to skip this. And then it has the tests. Inside this test folder, essentially, we just have where we define the test. Here is where we are giving the commands to the machine to tell, hey, I want you to do this and this, and then the output, I'm expecting it to be that. And the machine is just going to take care of everything. It's going to do that and make sure that the result is the expected one. Okay, so we have, for example, here, a test that it's saying has a title. And the test is essentially just going to this site, and it's checking if the page has the title of Playwright. Nice. Or there's another test that says, get started link. So this test, it's going to go again to this link. It's going to find an element on the page, and it's going to try to click it. And then it's going to expect that after clicking, the element that has a name of installation, a heading with an installation text to be visible. Okay, so you will see how we can do a lot of things. This is just a very, very specific example, but let's try to run it. So I'm just gonna remember that we have this command in here that it's npx playwright test. I'm gonna run it. I'm gonna say pnpx. In my case, I use pnpm, so that's why I use the p on the front, but I could also use npx, totally fine. Test, okay? Cool, and we are now going to see how it runs all the tests. Whoops, what's happening here? Let me try to find out the issue. Let's see. This. Oh my God! No! Hold on. What did I because I don't want to do PMPX stacks. Sorry, I want to do PMPX playwright. I was missing the command of playwright. Okay, and it's saying no tests found, because it's saying you're calling test in a configuration file. You're calling test in a file that's imported by a configuration file. You have two different versions of playwright test. This usually happens when one of your dependencies, it's probably because I'm gonna do it again. I have playwright installed in other projects, and usually playwright is not happy about it. So let me just do. Yep. Okay. What version do I have here? I have 1.3.9. Apologies for the problems. I'm gonna fix that in a second. Okay. And then we'll run it. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Let me try to run this again. I believe that it's working fine now. Oh, cool. Okay, great. Let's forget this last 5 minutes that just happened. The one thing that maybe you're gonna run into is what just happened to me, and it's that usually when you try to run things, playwright, instead of installing all the browsers in every project that you have, which could be destroying your memory machine, your machine's memory. Instead of doing that, it just installs everything in a single place. But because I had a different version of playwright installed in a different project, because we are developing applications in Finsweet and we use playwright, it just found out that this was a newer version, so there was a conflict. So I just forced a new install again, doing this, the npm exec playwright install, and that just cleared everything. So if that happens to you, just first try to reinstall again the browsers. Okay, so we see that the tests passed, but we don't really see what the hell happened, right? How about we try to see exactly what's going on? Let's do pm playwright, playwright test, but now I'm going to pass a UI flag. And essentially, instead of just running the tests in my terminal, it's going to spin up a browser, and it's going to show me that UI so I can see exactly what's going on. So let's get into it. And look what's happening here. It's spinning up a UI. And in this UI, can we play this? And I'll just zoom in if I can. There's not much I can do. Hold on. Okay, cool. So in here, we can essentially just watch what happened. The browser loaded the page, and it checked if you can see. You can even go step by step. So it went to the playwright page in here, and then it checked if the page had a title of playwright. So in this case, everything passed. So we have here the check. Or we can also see this one. We can also see the other test where it's going to visit the site. In here, it's going to click on the Get Started button. You can see how it's clicking the Get Started button. So it loads the site, it clicks on the button, and then it expects this installation, the installation heading to be visible. So essentially, we are making sure that when clicking and Get Started, it's navigating, and this heading it's on the page. So these are very, very simple tests, but at least it shows things that you can do with Playwright. Let's go into actually writing the tests ourselves. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this, and let's start by doing a unit test. I'm going to disable Copilot today because disable completions for TypeScript. Sure. I'm going to disable Copilot because otherwise it's going to be creating a test for me, but I want to do it with you today. Okay. So let's create our first test. And in this test, we want to do a unit test. So maybe instead of doing the test, let's actually write the function to test. So I'm going to create a index, not in here. Let's create a different folder. Let's go in source, and in here I'm going to do index.ts, for example. And I am going to write a function that it's called add numbers, like this. Okay. So this function, essentially what's going to do, it's going to be adding two numbers, right? So let's do A, which is going to be a number, and B, which also is going to be a number, right? And the expected return of it, it's obviously A plus B. That's it. Let's just focus on testing this. Obviously, I know that this is not a great example because who the hell wants to test this function, right? Who the hell wants to test A plus B? But the same as we're testing this function, you may want to write tests for other functions that do more complex things and you are not sure of the output in every single scenario. But let's start with this one. So I want to test this function. The first thing that I want to do in this case is I want to be able to import this function inside a test. So I'm going to export it from this file because we're writing a unit test. Once we jump into end-to-end testing, this is not going to be needed because instead of testing the function, the end-to-end test is going to test the website that is loading that function. But for now, we are going to run that function inside the test. So I'm going to export this. And now I want to create a test. And this test, we define a test by just calling the test function from here, this test method. And any test that you define with this method is going to be executed when you run the playwright test command. And it's going to be called, I don't know, something like adds numbers correctly. Okay, this is going to be our test. And in this test, we can, for example, do result. And in this result, we're just going to do add numbers in here. And we're going to pass 2 plus 5, for example. Oops, not 2 plus 5, sorry. 2 and 5, like this. Obviously, we know for sure that this result is going to be 7, right? Because it's very simple. But let's keep creating the tests and let's make them more and more complex from here. And the last thing that we want to do now is we have to define what we expect from it. When you're writing tests, you have two steps to take. One is giving some instructions of things that the test should do. And another thing is giving the extra instructions of things that we are expecting to happen. What's the expected output? Is it going to be 7? Is it going to be 6? Well, we'll see. So we're going to say expect the result. And in here, when I start typing, you will see how we have a lot of things going on here because we can essentially create any kind of logic to define an output. We can expect the result to be something, to be close to something, to be defined, to be false, to be greater than, to be greater or equal than, to be less than, to be none, to be null, to be truthy, to be undefined, to contain something, to be equal to something, to match something, to throw an error. We can check anything. In this case, we want to check if the result is 7, right? That's it. So let's just run the test. I'm going to come here and we are going to run pm playwright test. Now, it's probably one error is going to happen now, but I'll let the error happen and then I'll tell you why it happens. But let's do this. Oh, actually, no errors happened. Cool. Then Playwright has been upgraded since the last time that I checked this. Okay, but before, in case that you're curious, before you actually had to define the specific file where you were importing the functions. But it seems like it's no longer the case, so that's good. Okay, cool. So the test was passed. That's nice. How about we fail a test? How about we say that when we add two numbers, 2 and 5, we expect it to be 6. Obviously, this should fail, right? And great, this failed, and he even created a test report telling us what the hell happened. So we can see here how it run in 3 different browsers, in Chromium, in Firefox, and in WebKit, which would be Safari. And we can see how the expected result was 6. But when running this, at this specific line of code, we received 7, which is good, right? Because let's go back here and say we are expecting 7. Now let's imagine that this function of add numbers is a bit more complex and it's not just doing a plus b. And let's imagine that instead of doing a plus b, somehow, because I'm very stupid, I change this and I do this because I'm refactoring something, and or maybe I forget to do, somehow I'm refactoring stuff and I forget to add a return here or whatever, right? If I try to run this again, obviously this is going to fail because it's going to tell me, hey, you are expecting this to be 7, but you're not receiving something. So something is wrong with your function. Something is not working as it should. And this is where you catch a lot of bugs. Okay. And obviously, again, I'm saying this is very simple, but we're going to be scaling this up a bit more. So let's move on. Let's do an integration test. Okay. And in this integration test, I want to combine a few functions. So I'm going to call, let's do calculate. Okay. How about we do calculate BMI? So we want to do this. We want to take the body weight and we want to divide it. So we can create a function to divide something by the height, the square root of it. So we can also create a function to make a square root of the height. And maybe we could even receive the height in centimeters. And we could convert that into meters. So maybe we could have a different function for that. So let's do it. This calculate BMI is going to expect the weight. Let's actually say kilograms. And it's going to be a number. And it's going to expect the centimeters. And maybe the first thing that you want to do is convert the centimeters into meters. So we could do const centimeters to meters, for example, right? And this is going to get a centimeters function, centimeters param, and we want to return the centimeters divided by 100, and that would be the meters, right? So we have already one function. We can also do another one that says const divide numbers, and we can take two numbers. So I'm going to do A, it's a number, B, it's a number, and we can return A divided by B. And the last thing we can do square root of a number. And in this case, it's going to be a value, and we're going to return value plus value. Multiplied by value. Sorry, not the square root, sorry. Square number. So I was just confusing words in my mind. But we want to use the square number, right? So inside this calculate BMI, this is no longer a single function. This is something that we can create an integration test for because we have multiple moving parts going on. Now we're not going to be testing if the centimeters to meters function works correctly, or the divide numbers work correctly, or the square number works correctly. We're going to test all together in this function called calculate BMI. So let's do it. We're going to take the body weight and we're going to divide it by the height in meters. So first of all, we want to get the meters. And we want to say centimeters to meters. And we're going to pass the centimeters in here. And then also we want to square meters. And we're going to do square number. And we're going to pass the meters in here. And lastly, we want to return the divide numbers of the kilograms and the square meters, like this. Okay, so if we did it correctly, we could try to, test this. And let's just do a quick test. Let's open the calculator here. Say I have somebody who is 180, and I'm going to multiply that 180 again. So I want to now test somebody who is 180 and weights 85. Okay, so if we have 85 divided by 3.24, we should expect the result to be 26.23, right? So we can create the first test for this. Let's export this function in here, and we're gonna do test BMI outputs the right numbers. And here, okay, so let's do expect calculate BMI, and I'm gonna do the 85 kilograms and the 180 centimeters. Remember that we are passing it as centimeters to be close to, because remember, this is not going to be an exact number, right? This has a lot of decimals, and we want to just get something that is close to it. Otherwise, we will not be able to give infinite decimals. But it should be close to 26.23. So let's do it, 26.23, like that. Okay, so if we did it correctly, we would now run the test. And now I'm going to give you one tip. If you don't want to run all the tests all the time and you are just focusing on one single test, you can write here .only. So test.only. And now when we run playwright test, this is only going to run this specific test. So let's do pm playwright test. And this was passed. Nice. Now, what you want to do usually is not just pass one single example. You want to pass a bunch of examples. So we could do another one, and I'm going to do that. 50 and 150 centimeters should be close to 22. That's it. Let's run it again. And everything is passing. Nice. Imagine if I change this to 90. This now, hopefully, it's going to fail. Right, it failed. And you can see how this failed because the expected difference was this one, but we received a huge difference. So we received 40 instead of 22.22. So here you have how we can create an integration test. We essentially just test a function that contains multiple functions, and we define some outputs from that for that function. But I think that now it's a turn to jump into web apps. Jump into the real testing, the end-to-end testing, right? So how about we create this same calculator, but in Wisp? I have here a project, and I'm going to do a huge sprint right now, and I'm going to build that in 5 minutes. I'm going to build a calculator in Wisp in 5 minutes that just does that. It takes a height, it takes a weight, and it returns a value. Okay, let's do it super quick. So I'm going to create here in the container a form, and this is going to be weight, and this is going to be height in here, and the weight is going to be a type of number, and I'm going to give this a name of weight. Cool. And I want this to be required. And this height also is going to be a type, it's going to be called height. And it will be a type of number again, and it will be also required. This submit button I'm going to change, and I'm going to say calculate. And I am going to add a result. So let's do a result here. And I'm going to say H2 result. Let me add some padding into it, or some margin bottom, margin large, cool. And the result is going to be just the text block in here, like that. Okay, let's add some margin. I know that I'm a nice designer. You don't have to tell me every time. Stop it. Okay, cool. So we've got the web app already. We just now have to build the logic in Wisp, and then we write the test. Okay, so to build this logic in Wisp, all we have to do is add a couple attributes to the form. I'm gonna give this Wisp calculator, for example, and this in here, I'm gonna give it a Wisp result, like that. Cool. So let's publish this and let's jump into Wisp. Refresh attributes. Cool. Okay. We have the form here already. Wisp, it's processing this form. So all we want to do is when we submit this form, we want to grab the value of the weight and the height, and we want to spit out a result like that. Let's just do a single action that's going to call display result like that. And it's going to be for an element where in the result, we're setting text, plain text. And this text, we want it to be the result of taking the height, multiplying it by 2, and dividing the weight divided by the square of the height. So I just need to do return f.calculator.weight divided by f.calculator.height multiplied for f.calculator.height in here, right? So whenever we have something here, we are going to display it. Right now, it's going to be none because there's nothing. But whenever we have something to calculate, it's going to happen. So if I say, for example, 85, and the height is 1.8, like that, I'm going to calculate. And it's saying the two nearest valid values are 1 and 2, which means that this number, let's make it centimeters. So this should be centimeters, okay? Like that. So let me update a bit this. And first of all, we want to convert the height into centimeters, into meters, sorry. So I'm gonna do, let's do this. And I'm gonna say weight and height. And maybe something that we can try is if there is no weight or there is no height, we can return something like, please use the calculator, like that. And I'm going to predefine this. But if we actually have something, now I'm going to say meters. It's going to be the height divided by 100. And we just need to return, or we can do square. It's going to be the meters multiplied by the meters, like this. And I'm going to return the weight divided by the square, like that. Okay, cool. We have it already. So now, if we don't have anything written, this is saying, please use the calculator. But now when I put some weight, I'm going to add 85 and I put 180. Now we are getting the result in here. Nice. This is good. We could even improve it a bit if we come here and we do 2 fixed like this, which is going to just make sure that we just have 2 decimal numbers, which is nice. So let's try it again. I'm going to have a weight of 50. The height is going to be 150. We're going to calculate it, and the result is 22.22. Nice. Okay, so now we want to write this test, right? So we can go to this site. We can grab this URL, and let's jump into testing this. So I'm going to do test only because I just want to test this one for now. And I'm going to say calculator works fine. Now, this is a bit different now because now we are not running the functions in here. Now what we need to do is actually visit our web app and give the bot some instructions to interact with the site, right? So the first thing that we want to do is grab the page instance from here. This page instance, it's the browser page, okay? And to this page instance, we want to tell it to go to this URL, Okay, this is the site, my Webflow site. It's living in here. And I'm going to wait for it because it's asynchronous. So this must be async. Great. So we can find the inputs first. So let's try to find wait input. And for this, we can use something called page.locator. If we do page.locator, we can essentially, it's like query selector. We can select any element on the page. There's something also, there are many other ways of getting elements. You can get by alt text, you can get by label, you can get by placeholder, you can get by role, by test ID, by text, by title. I'm going to use by test ID because it's very convenient. This is something that you can define by giving the data test ID. This is something that all the test runners usually support. And I can say wait input, for example. And I'm going to say here data test ID. And this is going to be hide input. And we can also get the submit button because we want to click the submit button to submit the form. So I'm going to do data test ID, submit. And let's also check for the result. So I'm going to give here data test ID, result, like that. And I'm going to publish this. Great. So now we can do get by test ID, wait. And I'm going to do hide input too. And I'm going to say submit button, submit. And I'm going to do result. And this is going to be, again, page.get by test ID, result. So if we identify all the elements correctly, doing this will give us a reference to the elements and we can now interact with them. So we want to add some data into the elements. So we can do wait input. We can fill the input. So hold on, let me show you everything we can do with it. You can blur it, we can check it, we can clear it, we can click it, we can count, we can drag it, we can fill it. Fill it will be essentially typing into it. We can focus it. We can get an attribute from it. We can hover it. We can highlight it. We can change get the text, get the inner HTML, get the value, get if it's checked, get if it's disabled, get if it's editable. It doesn't end. So we have a lot of options to work with in here. Okay, but in this case, I'm going to fill it with, let's say, 85. Okay, so with this action in here, a bot will go to this site, will look for the wait input, and will fill it with the value of 85. So we'll visit it, we'll go to the wait input, and fill it with the value of 85. Nice. What else? By the way, and this is asynchronous, so you have to wait for it. Okay, you have to tell, hey, wait until this has been filled. And now I'm going to fill the hide input with a value of 180, like this. And so this would be input. What would be the next step? Await. We want to submit, right? Okay, so we're going to get the submit button and we're going to click it. Cool. And now we want to see if the result was displayed in here correctly, right? So we're going to say expect, because now we're expecting something to happen. Expect the result text content, because we want to get the text content of it. And this, I think that it's asynchronous, so I'm going to give it here. Result text, I'm going to say await the result, let's say a result element, so we don't get confused. The result element, let's get the text content of it. So we now expect the result text to be close to, actually no, because we're doing the, let me do it again, to be 26.23. Like this, right? So if all the steps happen and it works correctly, this means that the test is passing right. Okay, great. I don't know if this should be No, it doesn't. Cool. Great. So how about we run this? I'm going to do PM playwright test. And I'm going to use a different flag for now because I want to show you the result. And it's --headed. And this essentially will show me that the 3 different browsers running the test at the same time. So let's do it. And we'll see how the bots now open the site, fill it, and check for the result. And everything was passed. It happened pretty fast because obviously this is something that you want it to happen fast. Let me do it again. But essentially now we have a bot that it's going to our site and it's making sure that the calculator is working as expected. Cool. Okay. Isn't that nice or not? Okay. We can do it without headed, so we can run them just in the terminal without even doing anything. And in here, hopefully everything will pass again. Yep, everything passed correctly. We can even say PM exec playwright show report. And now it's going to show us a report of the tests. So we can see how it went to the site, check. It located the weight input and it filled it, check. Located the height input and it filled it, check. Submitted, located the submit button and clicked it, check. And got the text content, check. And then it expected to be, so the text content expected to be something, and it passed, check. Nice. Cool. Okay, so this now, if, for example, we change anything in our application, we are messing around in our app, and now instead of doing this, we're saying, hey, don't divide by 100. I don't know why you would do that, but I changed it. If I run this test again, obviously now this is going to fail. And this is very good because now I can be safely tweaking anything that I want from my app. And anytime that something is not as it should be, it's going to warn me, hey, you are not writing things correctly. You are not doing things as expected. Or sorry, not you, but the app. The app, it's not doing things as expected. Himansu is asking, what would happen if after waiting the submit button click, there's also a delay in the result to be calculated? Would the expect need to be awaited further, or we include some form of if result element changed, then expect? Well, the good thing of that, Himansu, that's a very good question. So Himansu is asking, so imagine that between this click and this element to be populated, imagine that it happens sometime. It takes a while. Let's actually do it. Let's say, I don't know, how can I do it here? I would need to change a lot of logic to show it. But let's imagine that instead of, being a calculation, it's a request, right? So the moment that you click, it takes a few milliseconds for the request to bring the results. The nice thing of the test runners is that they know that these things can happen. So instead of throwing you an error directly, Playwright is smart enough that when it detects that this is not passing, it's going to still wait a few milliseconds and will try it again a few times. So Playwright in the background, without telling you, it's just going to be trying a few times until things work as expected. So that's a good thing. Essentially, most of the time, you don't need to worry about delays. Playwright already has built-in logic to handle that for you, which is, nice. Actually, let me address what Himansu said, because maybe the way of doing this was not the right one. Because instead of doing this, getting the text content, because right now it's getting the text content just once, I think that we should do it differently. We should do this: expect result element to have text. Yep, that's the right way of doing it. So I'm correcting what I did before. Expect this to have text, and this text should be 26.23. And now this expect, you will see how now it's asynchronous. We have to wait for it. And the reason we have to wait for it is because Playwright will be trying it a few times until the result element has the text of 26.23. And usually most of these functions, you can pass an additional options with a timeout. And in this timeout, by default, I think it's 30 seconds, but maybe you just want to give it, 2 seconds. I don't know if it's in seconds or in milliseconds. Let me check. Time to retry in milliseconds. So maybe you want to give it 2000 milliseconds. And if the timeout passes and the text, it's still not 26 or 23, then this is going to fail. But usually you just want to leave the default. And if we run this again, this is going to pass anyways. Hopefully. Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, the thing that this is checking that I'm doing things right. See how helpful it is to have the tests? Because I completely forgot that I updated this function already. So now I am going to test it again until it passes. Thank you everyone for being here today. I think that we've covered pretty much all of the basics of automated testing. We've done unit test, integration test, and end-to-end test with a Whisk application, and hopefully you can find value in it. So if you liked it, please leave a like, leave a comment, and share the content. And we'll see you next Friday, where we're gonna dive deeper and with more advanced stuff in testing. So see you guys. Thank you everyone.